Welcome to another CEO Wisdom Pod. We have Kate Pozeznik with us today. She's CEO at Quirk. She does personal branding and she does resume and LinkedIn profile rewriting, sort of. She also helps with job search. So we're going to talk about that business, which she started 5 years ago, parenting, losing a job, divorce, when shit goes bad, what to do, how to shift gears. This podcast is presented to you by podpair.com. That's my podcasting company if you want to start a podcast. It's also presented by Qualia, by Neurohacker. It's the best nootropic I know for keeping your brain active during the day. As an entrepreneur that regularly crunch 16-hour days, I'll want to have something to support this brain of mine, remember stuff, have high energy level and everything between. Kate, glad to have you on the pod. Tell me a bit more about yourself and what you're up to nowadays.
It is a pleasure to be here. I've been excited about this conversation. So what am I up to? I actually just got back from a 2.5-week stint gallivanting around Portugal and Spain. So this last week, I've kind of been just easing back into work as usual. So that's been the top of my priorities recently, has been traveling and getting back into the swing of things.
Right. And how did you started that business of yours? That was already 5 years ago. Like what came about in your life that stimulated that massive change?
Yes. Well, actually, it was a number of things. First of all, I've always been the type of person that probably in the past people would consider career or job hoppers, meaning that every 2 or 3 years, I would personally get bored or restless or feel like I was ready for a new challenge. And so I tended to bounce around from industry to industry, function to function. And so, for example, I sold new construction homes. I've also taught marine science to children. I've sold IT research and advisory services, among other things, before becoming a career consultant and personal branding strategist. One of the things that happened during the time that I was preparing to start this business is, first of all, I got a diagnosis of ADHD, which explained a whole lot of things, including why I might tend to get a bit restless in the positions that I had, or struggled in the roles that I had in terms of paying attention, managing my time, etc. Concurrently, around that same time, my father received a terminal diagnosis for a form of dementia. And we knew that he only had 2 to 3 years to live. And he was an entrepreneur. He had owned and operated an assisted living facility for over 20 years. And I watched him work extremely hard to build his business and pass away before he was able to retire. And he had a number of things that he wanted to do when he retired, including traveling, doing family, etc. And so along with these things, I feel like this is a lot going on at the same time. Around the same time, I was also going through a separation out of a toxic marriage. So I had some major life changes and events that were all taking place around the same time. I was learning a lot about myself as an individual, along with realizing that my marriage was falling apart, and that one of my parents was passing. And I realized that I needed to make a change in how I spent my time and what I did for a living, partly so that I could be more present for my family, particularly my dad during that time, but also realizing that our lives are short and we only get one of them, depending on what your belief system is. And so I wanted to do something that would be a bit more flexible, that would accommodate the kind of schedule and lifestyle that I wanted. One of my former partners, who became an executive coach after leaving corporate America around the same time I did, started working with IT executives from a coaching perspective. And he wanted to offer some personal branding services, including resume writing. He knew I was a strong writer and asked me if I wanted to have a go at writing resumes and LinkedIn profiles for his clients. And at that time, my first set of clients was the IT team of the NCAA, the Athletic Association based in Indianapolis, Indiana. So that was my first foray into resume writing and career consulting was working with a really interesting organization and set of individuals. That opened the door to me starting my own business. So that was about late 2018. And from there, I loved it so much that I decided I could do this. And I overlapped my corporate job along with what was then my side hustle until I could make the move to go full time with my business.
Right. Lots of things there. So let's deconstruct a couple. What would be your definition of toxic in any sphere, in terms of person, in terms of professional or personal? And what would be your definition of a toxic marriage in that context?
Well, in the context that I was experiencing, my partner had an addiction problem that was impacting our marriage and the ability for us to parent together. And so that was one part of it. And it wasn't necessarily one-sided. I wasn't a great partner all the time either. I've learned a lot about myself since then in the way that I conduct relationships and communicate. And I would say from the workplace or career standpoint, toxic could mean a lot of different things. It could mean that you're in an environment where the culture is unhealthy, meaning that there might be people mistreated, discriminated against, harassed, a number of different things that are negative and harmful to people. It could also potentially mean just an environment that's not right for you, meaning perhaps it's not the right culture, not because it's a harmful one, but because it just doesn't align with your mission and values. And that just means it's a misalignment, not necessarily a bad place to work. So that would be how I would describe toxic in the context of what I've experienced. In my own career experience, I experienced misogyny from one of my managers. And that was also a reason for me to leave my second to last corporate job, was because at one point I was told, when I was unsure about my next role in the organization, he said, why don't you stay home until you can decide what you want to do next? Which to me could mean a lot of different things. But as a female, my first thought was, he's telling me I need to be a stay-at-home parent until I can sort out my career. And while it didn't really hurt my feelings, it kind of pissed me off. It was a motivator for me to kind of get my butt in gear and figure out what my next career would be. And luckily I landed a remote role in a new organization that allowed me some flexibility in how I spent my time. And not only that, accommodated my ADHD symptoms, which for me was being easily distracted, managing my time. Excuse me. This is the most unideal situation.
So you were talking about your ADHD and being diagnosed later on in your life. Like me, I think I was diagnosed, quote unquote. I don't like the word diagnosed. I don't like the word neurodivergent, mental disease, because I use it as a superpower. To be frank, I wouldn't be as successful without it, straight up. And this is not like bullshit talk or trying to reverse something negative into positive. Just I always had this huge amount of energy, and my brain is like a spread node, and then I can dig tunnels throughout like my circuits of knowledge, which is an unfair advantage this market. Anyway, I'm curious to know, like, what were the first symptoms that you've seen from that, and nowadays, how do you take that and take all that energy and focus it into one place?
Sure. So for me, the symptoms emerged as being very restless. I am a pencil tapper, a foot tapper. I have to be constantly moving or talking or engaging, doing something. It's very difficult for me to sit and watch a movie, for example. It will take me 4 evenings to watch a movie. And by the time I'm finished with it, I don't even remember what the beginning was about. So it's that kind of attention deficit. The other piece of it is I have always struggled with managing my time and being able to prioritize. So that's another area that I had struggled with. And when I was trying to figure out for a long time, brutally honest, I thought there was something wrong with me, that I was doing something wrong, that I was unsuccessful because of something I wasn't doing right. And when I started doing a little research around ADHD, which is typically not diagnosed in women often, if at all, I started realizing that the things I was experiencing might not just be who I was, but symptomatic of being potentially neurodivergent, or however you want to characterize being having ADHD. The things that helped me the most were being able to have a flexible schedule and being able to choose where and when I work. So, for example, in corporate America, I had a couple jobs where I worked in an open workspace, cubicles, the whole 9 yards. For me, that was a dangerous place to be, because you could have distractions from any direction, someone coming up to ask for help, getting a phone call unexpected, you name it, those things could happen. The other thing was I had to be there from 8 o'clock to 5 p.m., which are not necessarily my most productive working hours. So when I was able to take a remote job and work from home and have a flexible schedule, that alleviated some of the problems that I had with being able to figure out when I could work when I was most productive, which for me is either first thing in the morning or sometimes in the evening. And the other part of this was just being able to choose the environment I was in. In my own home, I can control certain variables that I was unable to control in the workplace in a difficult situation. I've also found a variety of ways to sort of calm my mind when I do tend to feel a little bit on the hyper side, such as breathing techniques. I do a 4-7-8 breathing technique that helps. And then also taking breaks to take walks. And that is one of the reasons that I adopted a dog, was because I would sometimes go from being easily distracted to these super hyper focus modes, which I love. And this is where we get to talking about superpowers of ADHD, is the ability to hyper focus. But I could do it for hours on end and not take breaks that were sometimes needed. So I adopted a dog to get me out of the house on a regular basis, to make sure I was taking breaks, to just let my brain calm down, take a break physically, to kind of get the engine started back up. Exercise is another thing that I recommend. It's been a very huge help for me. And I've started dancing in the last year, salsa and bachata dancing. So I'm a big fan of Latin dance. And that has helped me use my brain in different ways, which I think has also been very helpful, is just when you're operating your brain in a way that is outside the norm that you typically do from 8 to 5 or whatever your work hours are, I think it gives you the chance to recharge your battery physically, but by allowing different parts of your brain to work, I think that you're challenging yourself in different ways and learning in different ways when you're having to connect what's going on in your mind with how your body is behaving.
And when you feel stress, when you get into challenging situations, do you have a tough time controlling your brain and what it says to you?
Controlling my emotions and how I react.
Yeah, your self-talk, because ADHD, the brain's all over the
Oh
place.
yeah.
It's like it's a monkey on your back, so you have challenges getting that monkey off your back and
Yes,
actually like making straight and clear sense out of that situation and getting out of the heat.
I do. And a lot of it, I would, you could call it imposter syndrome, where I start to question, am I doing this right? Am I continually failing at this thing? I do struggle with negative self-talk. And I think a lot of us do, but I think I take it to the next level. I don't do things like half-assed. I really go for them when I go. To get myself out of there, this seems like a simple practice, but I literally write down the things that I know I'm good at that I'm not currently doubting myself about. The second thing I do is think about the things I'm grateful for in my life. And I kind of just, I don't even necessarily have to write those down. I just kind of think through them. I have a great family. I love what I do on the daily basis. I enjoy the clients that I work with. Thinking about the things that are positive and good in my life. And then oftentimes just doing some exercise or taking a break to use my mind in a different way is also kind of a good way for me to get out of there. And then I see a therapist on a regular basis. So I speak to someone else about what I'm feeling, get suggestions about how to cope with the negative feelings and emotions that I have in healthy ways. Because I think for people who have ADHD, myself included, we tend to look for a quick fix to alleviate those feelings. And some people, that could be drugs or alcohol, it could be overeating, it could be, or not eating at all. It could be a number of different things that you use to cope with stress. So I'm trying to do a better job of coping with them in healthy ways. And those are a few things that I've done that have been effective for me personally.
Right. And this year, what are your top goals in terms of growing your business?
It's a good question. So one of them is really growing the personal branding arm of my business, which is providing services that help people position themselves online, digitally, in terms of reaching specific goals. So their goal could be job seeking, but it might also be becoming a thought leader in their field or industry. It could be securing public speaking jobs, or it could even be trying to get a spot on a prestigious board of directors. So whatever those goals are, I help them realign their digital presence, their social media accounts, particularly LinkedIn, depending on what the end goal is, to better authentically depict who they are as a person and individual so that they are a compelling person for their audience to either engage with or reach out to. So that's one of the business goals I have. The other is to outsource more. I recently hired a marketing VA, which has changed my life. I wish I had done it much longer ago because it's taken things off my plate that need to get done, but that aren't necessarily revenue generating. So another one of my goals is finding or prioritizing the things that not only are revenue generating, but that are in my genius zone, things that I'm really good at, and then outsourcing or passing on the things that I don't enjoy and am not as strong as.
Do you feel that jobs are gonna survive the AI age? And would you recommend entrepreneurship for everyone?
Ooh, great questions. I do think jobs will survive in the AI age. I think what is critical is for people to, and regardless of what their position is to know how to leverage AI. Employers are looking for employees with skills related to AI, whether it's using generative AI to come up with content, materials, etc., or I generate ideas. But also, if you're able to use AI, you become a more valuable employee, but it also makes your life a lot easier in certain ways, depending on the types of needs and challenges you have. So I do think that people's jobs will survive, but that AI will be a critical skill to have in order to keep your job and or grow in your career. In terms of entrepreneurship, I can't speak for whether it's right for everyone, but I will say this. I never saw myself as an entrepreneur until 5 or 6 years ago, just shortly prior before I became an entrepreneur myself. My family tends to be entrepreneurial, so I had great examples of what it is to be a business owner, solopreneur, entrepreneur, but I never saw myself succeeding in that type of work. But I will say that I do believe anyone could do it if they were disciplined and motivated and enjoyed something enough to be really passionate about it.
Right. Well, thanks so much for that today. Kate, can we find out more about you online on LinkedIn? Where exactly?
Yes, I would absolutely love for listeners to connect with me on LinkedIn. My profile handle is K Pozeznik, And I'm also happy for you to take a look at my website, which is quirkpersonalbranding.com.